Do you ever feel like you're constantly doing, but you're never really getting anywhere? Maybe you're feeling burnt out, overwhelmed, and starting to wonder if is it all really worth it? The thing is, most people will seem to find that is they're just being lazy, but the truth is you're not lazy at all. You're just completely disconnected. And let's take a lesson from the Pursuit of Happiness and break down why your discipline is really just about habit building. I know I'm going to use an incredibly sad movie at moments to create a lesson, so bear with me and we'll try not to cry the way through this. So, what if I told you that the real secret to overcoming burnout isn't about pushing harder, like what most people seem to think that you do, you just push through it. It's about building habits that create clarity and momentum. Today, we're going to dive into how Will Smith's character Chris, from The Pursuit of Happiness, shows us how discipline is really just another word for consistency. Because a lot of people tend to have a bad reaction to the word discipline because when you say discipline, some people think about, the kind of militant style of discipline, or they think back to being a kid when they were disciplined by parents. And unfortunately, for some people, that was way beyond discipline, depending on the household you grew up in. But that's the kind of ideas that come up when you say discipline. If someone says you need to be more disciplined, we immediately start to think about those and it creates that negative feeling, which means we're more likely to rebel against anything that's classified as discipline. Instead, we're going to reframe that and talk about how you can build discipline in your life by seeing it more as habit building. Now, many of us feel like we're constantly in motion. We're always going, always doing things, but we're not actually getting anywhere. We're not making any real constructive progress, and it's just feeling like you're absolutely stuck. Like one of those really crappy dreams that you get where you're running but you're not moving, kind of like that. We start working things like long hours. We're all about the hustle, and we try to juggle all these responsibilities that we have. But then burnout starts to creep in. And tell me if that feels somewhat familiar. And we often associate discipline with things like punishment or restriction, or the need to force ourselves to do better. But the truth is, discipline doesn't have to feel like a chore. And I know people's butt cheeks are probably clenching up at the thought of that, hearing that word discipline so many times, because that's what we associate it with. Discipline is punishment and restriction, and you go, no, I need to do this. I'm forcing myself to do this. And what happens if you continuously force somebody to do something? They will rebel. And you will do it with yourself as well. Now, I say Chris, played by Will Smith in Pursuit of Happiness, will push all the Will Smith stuff to the side for now. We're not going to talk about that. We're talking about the movie and the story behind it. And it gives us a perfect example of how discipline isn't just about pushing harder, or isn't really about pushing harder at all in some cases. It's about building the right habits, even when everything around you seems massively impossible. Now, Chris didn't have all the answers. Of course, no one does. Everyone's just kind of making things up as they go along and doing the best they possibly can. But he kept showing up every day, consistently working on his goals step by step. And that's where we need to start shifting our mindset from seeing discipline as a punishment and seeing discipline as habit building, because they're pretty much the exact same thing. But our association with the word creates a negative part, thinks it's a punishment, therefore we don't feel good about it. Whereas you say, do you have any habits? People can list them all off constantly. Habits don't seem like quite a bad thing. You have good habits, bad habits. But habit building is something we're more naturally attuned to. And by the end of the video, not only understand why you feel burnt out, but you'll also learn how to turn your habit building into the key for your success. Now, the problem, the fear of discipline and the kind of not doing enough myth that people fall into. Now, let's talk about the fear of discipline. When most people hear that word discipline, they immediately think about things like that rigid structure, the militant-like schedules or childhood punishments. That's what comes to mind. And it's definitely what comes to my mind a lot of the time, even as I'm saying the word discipline now. It still comes into there. And it's a negative association with discipline that keeps us from embracing it. We think that discipline is something that's forced upon us, that pushes into this little nice little box, and nobody wants to be boxed because it feels restrictive, it doesn't feel free. But really, discipline's not. It's really about choosing actions that move us forward day in and day out. And if we bring, Will's character Chris back into it, at the beginning of the movie, Chris is living in a completely broken down situation, homeless, struggling to make ends meet, facing tough decisions. Despite all that, he doesn't quit. What he does is build a habit of consistently working towards a goal, becoming a stockbroker. Doesn't get discouraged by setbacks, he keeps going. And this consistency, even when things are incredibly rough, is the key part of discipline. But here's the thing, when we think of discipline as something harsh, like we're being punished, as I've said, we start to rebel against it. So we start thinking we're not doing enough or we're failing. But the truth is, you are doing enough. It's about consistently showing up little by little. You're doing your best, you're trying really hard. And we use the word discipline to make ourselves feel worse rather than seeing it for what it is of building those habits to good habits. And discipline isn't about forcing yourself into something you don't want to do. It's about making the right decisions consistently, building habits that will push you forward towards your goal every single day. And that can sometimes get a little bit lost in the translation there when I'm saying it's not about forcing yourself you don't want to do, because there's some things that you're maybe going to have to, you don't particularly like, but it's necessary to achieve a goal. So that's where you have to work out that separation. It's not twisting your arm up your back and forcing you into doing something horrendous that you'd never want to do in your life. It's about understanding what is necessary and what is needed and finding the right angle to come at so that you can pursue your goal in the right healthy way. So next time you're feeling like you're not doing enough, ask yourself, what's one small habit that I can do today that will help me get closer to my goal? It doesn't need to be big, doesn't need to be anything massively like I'm going to speak to 5,000 people today to get over my fear of talking to strangers. God, no, nothing like that. But just start with one action and build it from there. If we start to take a bit of a closer look at Chris's journey, when he gets that internship, he's given absolutely zero financial compensation. There's no guarantee of a job, and the odds have massively stacked against him. But what does he do? He doesn't give up because he's building the habit of showing up every single day. Regardless of how you feel about not having paid for that, you look at the actual mentality behind the person of being able to show up every day and work really hard and have that ethic. And whether it's studying for his exam or taking care of his son or finding places to sleep, I know we'll end up going down a tearful rabbit hole here. Chris makes a habit of just pushing forward even when things seem massively impossible. And it's the consistency despite the odds is the key to success. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of people start to say that things aren't meant to be for them because they give up far too easily, far too quickly. It is hard. Believe me, it is. No one's saying it's not, but it's having that drive to push forward and consistently work at it every single day. And the same applies to everyone. If you're feeling overwhelmed by a goal, it's easy to fall into that trap of thinking you need to do everything perfectly. But when you've seen from Chris and from many others, the success doesn't come overnight. It comes through consistent efforts. How many people have created loads of businesses that have failed and started again, failed and started again, failed, start again, or athletes who've been cut from teams or not made it to one level, but then went back the way to go forward. It's just that consistent effort that gets you towards your goal. And doesn't discipline doesn't mean it doesn't have to mean an extreme effort. Say it's not about going massively all in and burning yourself out. It's about building small habits that over time that will move you towards your goal. Every day you show up with the right actions and you build momentum because that momentum starts to compound and the interest comes back later. So if you commit to building one habit a day that will move you closer towards your goal, start small. It could be 10 minutes of focus work or set aside time to reflect on your next move. That's how you build discipline to achieve your dreams. And that sounds very similar to how you build a habit. You do the same thing repeatedly over and over again. Yet they're the same thing, discipline and habits. We just one word we don't like and one word we're okay with. And the common struggle many kind of high function individuals face is thinking that they're not doing enough. It's that nagging feeling that you could always be working harder or that you should be doing more. But The thing is, more doesn't always mean better. We'll go back to Chris, for example, again. He could have been consumed by the idea that he wasn't doing enough. And then that is a horrible stick to beat yourself with because you're never going to escape that. And then you're just going to constantly feel devalued in yourself because you feel that it's your fault you're not doing enough when really you are. It's just you have to do it consistently and let it build over time. And what he did was he focused on what mattered. He stuck with the small, consistent actions that contributed to the growth. It could have been staying up late to study, or it could be making sure someone was taking care of while they worked. And it's something a lot of men, especially dads, can relate to massively about doing as much as you possibly can and giving your all. But we'll always keep saying we're not doing enough because we always think we could do more. But it's allowing yourself that time to think and appreciate the way that you are doing enough. It's just consistent action you're looking for. And many of us fall into the trap of overcompensating because we think we're not doing enough. But the key is understanding that the small actions are all going to add up. You don't need to do everything all at once. Focus on building habits that you can maintain over time. And it's realizing this lie of not doing enough is based on this myth that more action means more success. It's more about focused effort rather than a constant hustle. You shouldn't have to be working 27 hours a day, 8 days a week, and all the rest of the nonsense people try to throw out of if you're not doing this, then you're not committing, you're not working. No. Burnout is a real thing. We want to avoid that because if you're burnt out, you end up going way further back to try and go forward again, and it just creates this horrible cycle. So next time you feel overwhelmed by everything that you think you should be doing, stop and ask, what's the one thing that I can focus on that will make the biggest difference? Small action, big impact is what we're looking for. Once you identify that, you break it into the smaller tasks and start taking that consistent action. Look at the goal, look at what needs to be done, and start breaking it down into smaller, manageable tasks. And God, there's so many sayings about things like, it's hard to see top of a mountain when you're standing for the bottom, looking up and all that stuff. You just have to take the first step. But that's a very valid point. You can never see how you're going to get there if you don't start moving forward. You can just stand there and never move, and then you'll never get there anyway. That's your two options: do or don't. And when we look at things like self-sabotage, the truth behind that, when it comes to Chris, there was more than just the external challenges. He also had to confront his own fears and insecurities, which we all have in abundance, it seems. The fear of failure, the fear of not being good enough. And these are the same fears that we will face when we're trying to reach our goals, especially when we don't get there quite as quickly as we would like to or think we should. They say, well, I'm a failure, I'm not good enough. That creeps in, but really that's not the case. We have to look at things very logically. But the key to breaking free from any self-sabotage is clarity. When Chris got clear on his goal to prove himself that he could succeed, stop sabotaging himself. He aligned his actions with deeper motivations. You find your path and you commit to it and you stick to it. And when we don't have clarity, that's when we tend to end up self-sabotaging by staying stuck in the stages of overthinking and the fear of failure. We start to procrastinate, thinking we're not ready, but the truth is, no one's ever really ready. You just need to take that first step. Since we're talking about parents to an extent, people will go, well, I'll be a parent when I'm ready. No one's ever really ready for that stuff. Even when you think you are, there's always some sort of curveball that comes there. You don't realize what it's like when you have to change shitty nappies or diapers and the smell when it hits you, go, I'm not prepared for this. No one's ever fully prepared for anything as much as you can plan and prepare for it. You become fully prepared by doing the thing because that's when you learn. Textbooks to me mean nothing until you actually start to take action and do it. They give you a bit of an understanding, whether that be parent or life or work or whatever it may be. Anyone who's worked any sort of jobs can tell you, you learn more by doing, and I certainly believe that massively. And that's what happens if you get stuck in overthinking, you procrastinate, you don't take action, because you think, oh, well, I need to do this stuff first. No, you get started. And when you have that clarity of your goals or what you're going to achieve, it starts to remove fear because you know what you're doing, you know what you're working towards. When you know what you want and why you want it, it's very easy to align your habits towards your goal. Just basically writing them down and going there, and you follow that path. And then when it kicks you off, you can get back onto it. That's it. And then, yeah, you will get curveballs, adapt and overcome. So take a few minutes today to get clear on why you're doing what you're doing. Write down your goals and ask yourself, why does this matter to me? That kind of clarity will make it easier to stay disciplined and consistent. And if you still don't like the word disciplined, we'll just keep saying to build the habits I need to be successful. To build the habits I need to get where I want to be. And if you're ready to start building habits that'll keep you consistent and you want to avoid things like self-sabotage, then I've got a really good free course that'll drop in the link down the bottom. You can go on there, you can check it out. It was one I used as a 5-day challenge, but it was so good I kept it about, and people could just get access to it to go through it themselves. It helps you build these good habits that will help you with your success. And if you want any more information, I will drop in my Facebook link. You can go over and you can send my message anytime. But the final thoughts here are that discipline doesn't have to be a dirty word. It's about creating the right habits that will support your long-term goals. I get it's a movie, but remember it's based on a real person. If Chris can do it, building habits and pushing through adversity, you can too. It is the world is filled with people who have done the very same thing. You are no different from them. Everyone's had huge obstacles they've had to overcome. Some less, some more than others. That's life, unfortunately. That's just how it is. Some people have it harder, but that doesn't mean that you can't do the same things they did. So, what small habit are you going to commit to today? How about a little bit of accountability? If you drop it in the comments, then I can reply to it and we'll see if we can hold you accountable for it and check in maybe a couple of months to see if you've achieved that goal and where you are. Use this as a sign to start working towards what it is you want from life and where you want to be. And don't forget to subscribe and check out some of the other videos.